The picnic basket was still smoking when I stepped out in my bathrobe and boots, coffee in one hand, tranquilizer gun in the other. A flip-flop was half buried in the moss like a tombstone. Somebody's potato salad had been trampled into a sad paste, and over by the alder trees a grown man in cargo shorts was climbing a branch like his mortgage depended on it. In the middle of all that chaos, calm as a security guard on a lunch break, a 600-pound cinnamon grizzly named Maple sniffed the breeze and blinked her one good eye at the people who had just decided my property was their community park. You're probably wondering how we got here, why I'm in a robe, why a bear named Maple is on my side of the story, and why the president of the Lakeside Haven HOA is screaming about liability while holding a clipboard like it's a badge. Short version, this land picked me before I knew I needed it. Long version, my Uncle Ray left me 78 acres of lakefront with a note that said, "Keep them wild, keep them fed, keep the cars out." That man was a contradictory miracle, part hermit, part scientist, beard like a Christmas wreath, brain like a field guide. He worked with the state years before he died to lock the place down as agricultural conservation habitat. No developments, no shared amenities, no weekend warrior zip lines, just water, wind, and the things that belong to both. Tucked behind the western ridge is the reason I read every regulation line by line. A reinforced open-air enclosure with elevated catwalks, live brush fencing, a gate that'll stop an ATV, and enough signage to make a lawyer smile. That's Maple's home. She was rescued from a roadside circus as a cub, blind in one eye, imprinted on people enough to be non-releasable, and designated under a federal educational permit that, translated into plain English, says, "This animal lives here, legally, for life." My job is boring in the most beautiful way. Check the fence, file the paperwork, thaw the salmon, log the weights, walk the line every morning with a thermos and a checklist like I'm clocking in for a job where the punch card is birdsong. And then the HOA moved in across the lake. Lakeside Haven looks like a catalog spread, cedar facades, 3-floor plans, names like Spruce Bluff and Maple Shores, even though the actual spruce and the actual shores are on my side of the line. At first it was tiny stuff I didn't mind. A kid with a bobber on the far edge of the water, a couple paddling too close, and scaring a heron so badly she scolded them for 10 minutes. I put up the politest signs I could craft. Private conservation zone. No trespassing. Live wildlife. Thank you kindly. It worked, until Madison Crowell got elected president. Madison is the sort of person who says, with all due respect, and then proceeds to take none. She sent a letter typed in a font that tries too hard, asking to discuss shared lakefront amenities for resident families. I mailed back a certified packet the thickness of a phone book. Conservation easement, federal permit, state inspections, maps with lines bright as highlighters, and a sticky note that said, "This isn't a golf course, Madison. It's a bear sanctuary." She responded with a smile I could hear through the envelope and a second letter hinting at public water access. I sent a bigger map. She sent silence. For about a month. Then the little thing started. A sap-wet stump inside my line where a tree had been cut clean. Orange survey tape on trunks that weren't theirs. A weed-whacked corridor right through a turtle nesting patch I've guarded since Uncle Ray taught me how to read the sand like a diary. And one morning, a laminated sign staked into my soil, future site of HOA trail extension, enjoy nature responsibly. I pulled it up, drove to their pancake and planning brunch, and set it down on her table next to the syrup like a dead fish. "You push one more inch onto my property," I said, friendly as I could manage while everyone else stopped chewing, "and I will feed your surveyor to Maple." Metaphorically, but the paperwork won't be. Madison didn't even flinch. "A friend of mine is a property attorney," she said, tapping her clipboard. "He says you can't own a natural lake." "I don't own the water," I told her. "I own the dirt under it, the shore around it, and the only legal way to reach it. This isn't a public beach. It's a habitat with a federal file thick enough to bench press." "We'll let the courts decide," she said, with that pleasant tone people use when they're planning to stand on your porch and sell you your own door. So I did what Uncle Ray would have done. I tightened the perimeter. New solar cameras. Fresh signs every 50 yards with statutes and section numbers big enough for binoculars. I doubled the western fence and added a third lock I change every week. I fed Maple extra salmon, smoked, her favorite, and started a binder called Madison's Greatest Hits, filled with timestamps and GPS pins and photos of every pink flag I yanked out of my soil. I sent copies of everything to the county and the feds with a cover letter that basically said, if a fool wanders into a bear enclosure, I'd like witnesses on paper. It went quiet long enough for me to get superstitious, which is how you know Act 2 is about to start. The flyer blew in on a Thursday. Join us for the spring renewal picnic at the natural lakeside meadow. Music, food trucks, lawn games, family bonding. There is only one natural lakeside meadow within a mile, and I mow it with deer, not tractors. I drove the line and found the invasion. Stakes 15 feet past my fence, twine stretched like they were string lining a wedding arch across a fox den, and a cheerful sandwich board pointing guests directly toward the gate of Maple's enclosure as if that fence was a rustic photo backdrop and not a legal boundary with consequences. I called the sheriff. Deputy Alvarez said he'd swing by Monday. I called the state wildlife office. Their guy didn't laugh, which I appreciated. If the bear is startled into public view, he said, the liability belongs to whoever put a crowd between a grizzly and a quiet path back. I hung a vinyl banner across the old trail they keep pretending is a public path. You are entering a federally permitted live bear habitat. Turn back or leave limbless. I figured the fonts did half the work. The other half arrived on Saturday at 11:07 a.m., carried by Bluetooth speakers blasting early 2000s pop that made the birds go silent. Picture a summer camp funded by denial. Folding tables with sunflower tablecloths, a bounce house losing a slow fight with gravity, a smoker dragged across moss old enough to have an opinion, and Madison striding around in a white blazer like a field marshal at a cupcake war. They set the crafts tent 20 feet from Maple's gate. They hung fairy lights in an ash tree that predates our state's highway system. Kids were playing cornhole while their parents held rows and tumblers labeled Mom Fuel. I stood on my porch and did nothing but film, check my tranquilizer kit, sip coffee, and hope Maple kept her curiosity to a minimum. They lasted 90 minutes. A kid named Brandon airmailed a frisbee over the gate like a bad omen, froze, then did what kids do. Chased it, and 10 seconds later came sprinting back, mouth open like a siren, yelling, "Bear!" Panic is a fascinating thing in the wild. It looks exactly the same in the suburbs, shouting, clattering, two dads tripping over the same cooler, a mom shielding a tiny dog like she's guarding the nuclear codes. Madison didn't run. She marched straight to the gate as if she'd filed for a permit to be brave. Who is responsible for this? She demanded at the fence. To the universe, to me, to God. That would be me, I said, stepping out of the tree-line in a bathrobe and boots, which is not the authority look I wanted, but it's the one the day provided. Nobody move. Nobody shout. She's curious. She's not angry. And I'm going to put her to sleep like a Sunday nap. Maple had sniffed the edges, belly full of fish, interest fading. I radioed the state officer. Maple out, low alert, public present, raised the rifle, and sent one dart into her flank. She grunted, sat down like a tired uncle, yawned, and went heavy-eyed. 10 minutes later, she was snoring. 20 minutes after that, the state officer rolled up, clipboard calm, signed the log, and helped me guide Maple back through the gate. Madison, with streaked mascara and a wine bloom on her blouse, stepped toward me like a ghost that hadn't accepted its condition. You staged this, she spat. You planted that animal out here to threaten families. You threw a party in a bear preserve, I said. The only thing I planted was a banner that told you not to. 72 hours later, the envelope arrived. Faux gold seal on the flap. Civil nuisance complaint in bold like they thought capital letters outrank federal permits. According to Madison's board, Maple wasn't a protected animal. She was an apex predator maintained to intimidate. The complaint came with 3 blurry photos. Maple sniffing air, me with a tranquilizer gun looking like I was holding a breakfast beer, and a bounce house mid-deflation like it was evidence of savagery. They weaponized fear because fear is cheap and it travels. I answered with a packet thick enough to sprain a wrist. Conservation easement, state permits, federal registration, letters from the university's ecology department, and a nonprofit I partner with for habitat surveys, inspection logs, incident reports, and security footage with timestamps showing exactly where their picnic crossed my line, how many warnings they passed, and which board members hammered stakes into protected ground. While I filed, Madison went full propaganda. Flyers about unregulated predators, a neighborhood Facebook warning that her golden retriever had lost his appetite after hearing Maple snore, and for the piece de resistance, a row of solar-powered ultrasonic sirens that screeched every time a squirrel had an opinion, wrecking a heron's nesting cycle I've stewarded for 6 years. So I went public. I called Dr. Lila Chun, a state biologist who knows her field and has zero tolerance for nonsense. And I called Jonah Pike, an independent reporter with a YouTube channel that gets more eyeballs than HOA newsletters ever will. We walked the property on camera, fences, signs, the permit numbers, the vegetation I've protected, the places their flags pierced the wrong dirt. Maple, being Maple, chose that moment to lumber out, flop in a patch of sun, and roll like a dog with a secret. Jonah's video, The Bear Next Door, When Suburbia Meets a Sanctuary, went mildly viral, then wildly viral. The local NPR picked it up. A wildlife vet retweeted it. Someone made a gif of Maple sneezing, and the internet did what it does when it finds something pure. It made her a folk hero in 12 hours flat. Public sympathy is a funny mirror. It made some of Madison's neighbors ask basic questions. Why are our dues paying for lawsuits? Why are we picking a fight with a permit? Why does our board keep stapling party banners to trees we don't own? That's when Madison made her boldest move, an eminent domain-ish petition to reassign underutilized private land for essential community recreation. With 37 digital signatures, 3 of which belonged to the deceased, 5 to folks who had moved to Boise, and a handful that were just M. Crowell written 2 ways like she hoped a pseudonym could vote. I sent the whole bundle to the state attorney and the Department of Natural Resources. 2 weeks later, investigations opened, her vice president resigned, and a conservation official called to ask if I'd like the property upgraded to critical habitat status. If you've never heard a bureaucrat say the word permanent, it's surprisingly musical. The hearing was the last chapter, thick with humidity and paperwork. County Admin Building, 9 a.m., panel of 3, Zoning Council, a wildlife officer, and in the center, Judge Carmen Rhodes, who has the posture of a lighthouse and the reputation of someone who once assigned community service for hedge butchering. Madison went first with a leather-bound presentation titled When Nature Becomes a Menace. She played stock photos of injuries, said pheromone drift like she'd invented it, and called my permit a technical loophole. She sat down like she'd scored points. The room smelled like copier ink and tension. Mr. Hartley? Judge Rhodes said. I walked up with a binder and a clicker. If it pleased the panel, a timeline. Drone footage filled the screen, not gore, just facts. The picnic crossing the line. Stakes pounded into a fox den. A bounce house sagging on an endangered moss bed. Close-ups of signs they walked past to get there. Then the map that shows my protected perimeter. Then the federal permit. Then letters from 3 biologists who think this place is a model. And then, because even justice gets to enjoy the reveal, a spreadsheet showing $18,427 of HOA, emergency landscaping funds redirected to party rentals, a generator hookup, decor, and yes, a $400 invoice labeled Bear Face Painting, Maple Makeover. You could hear someone swallow. Judge Rhodes leaned in. Ms. Crowell, did you personally approve these expenditures? Madison adjusted her necklace. As acting president, yes or no? Yes. The gavel hit once, heavy. Petition denied. Land stays private, conserved under state and federal jurisdiction. Immediate cease and desist within 100 yards of my line. Public retraction of false safety claims. Full reimbursement to the emergency fund, including the face painting. Brent, her husband, made a sound like a tire losing air. I closed my binder and felt, not triumph exactly, but a settling, like a porch after you fix the joist that's been complaining for years. The fallout was quick. The community called a special meeting and voted no confidence. Madison out, treasurer out. The board suddenly interested in wetlands regulations. The new president, a soft-spoken guy named Noah Green who actually knows what a riparian buffer is, took me to coffee and asked if I'd lead a Saturday nature walk for the neighborhood kids. I said yes, on one condition, rename the newsletter. To what, he asked. The Bare Facts, I said. He laughed and published the first issue with Maple snoring on page 1 like a queen who made it out of the hard parts. We built an observation deck with a little GoFundMe that folks started when Maple sneezed on the internet. The herons nested again. The foxes returned to the den that Bob tried to anchor a speaker stand into. I carved a sign from cedar and set it by the dock where the bounce house once surrendered to physics, private property. Home of Maple, HOA's real president. Elected unanimously. Here's the thing that stuck with me through all of this, the part that changed me in ways I didn't see coming. I used to think boundaries were mostly about fences and locks and paperwork. And they are, don't get me wrong. But they're also about teaching people that nature doesn't ask permission to be itself. And that community isn't a word you get to use like a key for someone else's door. Madison wasn't evil. She was addicted to control, convinced that a clipboard becomes law if you hold it high enough. She forgot that authority without humility is just noise, and noise is no match for a bear that yawns, lies down, and reminds everyone what actually matters. So yeah, that's how I ended up in a bathrobe with a tranquilizer gun, on a day when potato salad met its maker and Maple went viral for doing nothing but breathing. If you ask me whether I'd do it all again, call the state, file the paperwork, hold my ground while the internet turned a grizzly into a meme, the answer is yes, every time. Uncle Ray's note is still taped over my desk, coffee stained and curling at the edges. Keep them wild, keep them fed, keep the cars out. I'd add a fourth line now. Keep the clipboards honest. Tell me where you land on this, because I know some of you live under HOAs and some of you are on the boards. Was Madison protecting her neighbors, or was she trying to turn the wild into a photo op and call it safety? Should a community's right to enjoy nature extend onto land that exists precisely because it's not a park? Drop your take in the comments. Argue it out. What's the line between stewardship and control, and who gets to draw it? If Maple earned a seat at the table today, share this with someone who thinks a fence is an invitation. And if you've got your own story about a neighborhood power trip colliding with common sense, I want to hear it. Justice isn't always a gavel. It's sometimes a bare nap and a camera with a full battery.